Yo, welcome to Meloners Magikarp's YouTube. Today we're going to be looking at Tord Reklev's Urshifu list. He posted the list that he played yesterday as the final boss in the Channel Fireball Challenge, as well as his team challenge. It's a super interesting archetype, so we're going to go over kind of how the deck runs, some of the strategies. I'm not an expert on it, but I've played a handful of games with the list. I feel like I figured it out pretty well. If you watch me on stream when I was playing it, I'm not a huge fan of the multiple types in here because it feels a little clunky, but the deck has answers to absolutely everything, which is also kind of ridiculous in this current state. So we have our Rapid Strike Urshifu in here. You know, it's all the same stuff it's been. Switch it from your bench to your active, can hit for 150 for a single energy, and for fighting colorless, discard all the energy, and it can hit 2 Pokemon for 120. Very good. Can spread, can hit hard, is a very good typing. Of course, hits Pikarom for weakness, hits Eternatus for weakness. Both very good things. We've paired it in this deck with Dragapult VMAX. Dragapult VMAX, we know it. Took a little break for a while there when Eternatus was the BDIF, but now we've paired it with something that bops Eternatus in the face, which is very good for it. And it's a powerful card. It covers a lot of weaknesses out there. One, it hits Urshifu for weakness. So if you play a mirror match, you are able to, say, well, I'm better, I'm more equipped for it. I have resistance against you, and I hit you for weakness. Incredibly good. Again, single prize stuff, you're able to spread. So something like Mad Party, for example. Ooh, Dragapult just kind of eats that alive. While Urshifu can struggle a bit if they get down a Mew. It can be a little bit of an annoying matchup. So Dragapult covers a bunch of weaknesses there. Of course, Max Phantom. 130, put 5 damage counters on your Pokemon any way you like. And you may say, is this deck really only to cover weaknesses? Partially, yes. Fighting plus Psychic type will cover most of the weaknesses in the game. So you have Eternatus, Pikarom, both tier 1 decks, weak to Urshifu. You have Mewtwo and Urshifu, both tier 1 decks, weak to Dragapult. So we're missing ADP from there. We're missing Victini VMAX from there. Now, ADP, we have Spread. Spread plays a very important role in this. And Victini, Centiskorch, any other 320 HP Pokemon, we also have kind of perfect math for it. So I'm going to go ahead and explain that math real quick. Max Phantom, 130 plus 5 to the bench. So if your opponent has a Victini V on the bench, or a Centiskorch V, or any random 320 HP Pokemon, a Lapras, something we don't hit for weakness, put 5 damage counters on it. You can then Gale Thrust into it, another 150. So now it's 200 damage counters on it. And then we can G-Max Rapid Flow to finish it off with another 120 for a perfect 320 math. You may say, okay, that's 3 attacks to take 3 prizes. But what if they hit us harder? Remember, we're also able to hit 120 on something else, so we can boss up a Dedenne or a Crobat, take 2 prizes from there with our G-Max Rapid Flow. Max Phantom, same thing. We're able to take out a single prizer, or we're able to hit damage on something else. And this deck will really thrive on those multi-prize turns against stuff that we don't hit weakness for. ADP, for example, constantly taking 5 prize turns late in the game. Something like a Victini or a Tempozard, you're taking multiple prizes. The deck has a ton of options. It can be super aggro, you're hitting for weakness on a lot of stuff. The deck can spread damage around, and both of those things together just give you so many options. And typically, if a deck has a lot of options, it gives you a lot of room to outplay your opponent, which is one of the reasons why I think Tord, who, if you're unaware, I've said the name a couple times, he has won multiple international championships. He top 4'd the last Worlds that happened. He's one of the best players in the game by far. And so him gravitating towards a deck like this makes a bit of sense. 2 Crobat, 2 Dedenne. One of the biggest issues with the deck you will find almost immediately is it does not draw very well. So you need those support Pokemon in order to actually draw cards sometimes. There's no Jirachi engine, there's no anything like that. You're just kind of going to draw cards with those support Pokemon. We have a Goss. Goss obviously recycles all of our supporters. So this adds some consistency to what is honestly not a super consistent deck. When I played it, if I set up, I won. And if I didn't win, it's probably because I didn't set up, which does happen, unfortunately. So a couple things that are going on in here. We have the Mew from Unbroken Bonds. Very good against Cramorant in Tempozard, which is coming back as one of the BDIFs for sure. as well as very important in the Urshifu mirror match. Even though we hit Urshifu for weakness, we can't let them VMAX rapid flow and take multi-prize turns. So we need Mew for that matchup. It's also nice against Cramorant V as well. And then we play a Mimikyu from Celestial Storm with that Shadow Box ability. Pokemon GX that have any damage counters on them have no abilities. It's good in a variety of matchups. The big one is against Mewtwo and Mew. Shut it off. But it's also good against Urshifu. They play a Jirachi down. You want them to have weakness, the Jirachi GX. So Max Phantom, put 1 damage counter at least on that Jirachi GX. Suddenly, they have weakness for the rest of the game. You're swinging for 260 with your Dragapult while taking 30 less because of resistance. You're in a good spot. Also good against something like a Blacephalon, Tempozard. They want to rely on that Oricorio. If they bench it early, put a damage counter on it. If they don't bench it early, you have Reset Stamp. So Shadowbox Mimikyu in a deck that can spread damage counters so effectively is actually in a really, really strong spot right now. Good against Urshifu, good against Mewtwo. It's good against Tempozard as well. It's also, it's also good against Pikarom. I almost forgot to mention that because that's just one of those things like pops in my head immediately. But this hits Pikarom for weakness. This hits Mewtwo for weakness. This also just shuts off the Mewtwo. So if they go in with Mewtwo early, they start the Mewtwo, you can always just strafe into the Mewtwo, or you can bite it as well, and then shut it off. And then the matchup's incredibly easy. Like, it's not in here for Pikarom, but it adds just more versatility. I love Pikarom. Man, this deck just bodies it. It's so sad. 3 Pcoms. You gotta find your evolutions. Look, there's no better support out there for finding stuff. You may say, oh, what about Incense? What about Great Ball? We have 21 Pokemon. When I played it, Pcom is live most of the time because you typically will have Pokemon in your hand. So Pcom, pretty solid card. 4 Quick Ball, of course, 2 Reset Stamps. One of my favorite things about when Tord plays a deck is it has Reset Stamp in it. Stamp is one of the best comeback mechanics in the game. You may say, oh, I always stamp my opponent into what they need. It's like, well, if you didn't stamp them, they probably definitely had what they needed. So you at least had the opportunity to stop them. And yes, it does happen. I have won plenty of games by reset stamping my opponent into a dead hand. Gotta have it. It is a wonderful comeback mechanic. Don't cut that card. 2 switch, you may say, is 2 switch enough? Yes, 2 switch plus 2 balloons is plenty. The only thing that we're afraid of for paralysis would be Pikarom or potentially Green's Tapu Koko, although that's not a super popular deck. But we don't really care because Pikarom, we just beat them anyway. No amount of paralysis is going to help them to beat us. 1 Chaotic Swell, just there for the Hearth decks. There's nothing else we really want. I've seen some of the lists playing Power Plant before. We have the Shadow Box Mimikyu to do the exact same thing, and that doesn't shut off our Dedennes, because like I said, the deck can be a bit clunky. So I'm actually a fan of the Swell. I've seen a lot of people playing Plant, and I think the Swell is just better because that lets us use Dedenne. We're not trying to make our opponent dead draw. We are trying to very tactfully take our 6 prizes before they take their 6 prizes. And we have Stamp just in case we need another turn. 3 boss, 4/4 supporter line. Don't cut the supporters. You'll play a few games with the deck and realize you need every single one of them. 2 balloons. The balloons let us reset Gale Thrust whenever we can. It also gives us another pivot. Pivot is incredibly nice. Shove a balloon on a Crobat or whatever, and you can just switch it out whenever you need to. And the energy split. The energy split is why I don't like this deck personally. This is the optimal energy split. I would be incredibly shocked if someone finds a better one. 4 Auroras. Aurora can be used by every single thing in the deck. Heck, you can singly return GX if you want to. I wouldn't, but you could. I mean, okay, I say I wouldn't. There are worlds where you might. The 4 Horror Energies. Look, you might say this deck is weak to Fan of Waves. It's fine. You can change the deck later if people start playing Fan of Waves, but most people don't. Lets you put extra damage. Well, it doesn't let you. You put extra damage counters on your opponent's active if they hit into the Dragapult this is attached to, or you can attach to a Mew, I guess, and Psi Power as well to set up some math, which is something that will come up, actually. So it's just extra damage counters. Like I said, this is a spread deck largely. A spread deck that's not shut off by Mew entirely, a spread deck with options. But typically more damage counters is better, so there's literally no reason not to play this except Fan of Waves, but as of right now, I would not tech for Fan of Waves. I would consider teching a Fan of Waves into our deck potentially. Not this one, well, maybe this one. As of right now, the metagame, people are not playing Fan. and a 4 count of Rapid Strike Energy. This card's just good. 2 energies on our Urshifu. This lets us potentially, actually, as we play another card in this deck that I forgot to mention, this lets us potentially G-Max Rapid Flow for a single attachment. It requires 2. We play 2 Karate Belt. Karate Belt, you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Attacks of the Pokemon's cards attach you cost fighting energy less. So Karate Belt plus a Rapid Strike Energy lets you use G-Max Rapid Flow for that one single attachment, which is incredibly powerful. Now you may be saying, well, am I really going to be behind? Yes, this deck takes big 4 or 5 prize turns to win the game typically. So Karate Belt is almost always going to be active. Now you may be saying, what if I don't go behind on prizes? Look, if you're winning the game, then you're winning the game. You're playing a deck that likes to play from behind, but if you're playing from being ahead, you're probably just going to win the game because you have comeback mechanics and comeback potential that your opponent probably doesn't have. So Karate Belt has been incredibly useful. The few games where I never got Karate Belt activated, I was never going to lose those games anyway. So Karate Belt is so powerful for being able to do that. It also helps with the awkward energy costs in this deck. You can throw a Karate Belt down turn 1 on a Rapid Strike Urshifu, throw another energy on a Dragapult, and say, look, if you KO the Dedenne in the active or whatever's in the active spot, I can Gale Thrust you next turn, or I can Max Phantom you. And that's a lot of pressure to apply to an opponent. It really sets up a lot of awkward situations for them to play around. And really, like I said, the only thing this deck loses to is A, poor choices by the player, or B, it loses to itself. it can just lose to itself because there's just so much awkward stuff in here. I highly suggest trying out the deck. So some of the quick matchups, we want to go Urshifu heavy in matchups like Pikarom, Eternatus, those like fighting weak things. In matchups like Mewtwo and Mew against opposing Urshifus, we typically want to go in with the Dragapult route. Against something like a Victini, it depends on their start, it depends what they get, but I have kind of liked going with Dragapult early in a matchup where we don't hit weakness. It's able to set up the Max Phantom. The Max Phantom is able to set up those big swing turns late. And typically, you're just kind of like Max Phantoming around, just kind of vibing. Let your opponent take those 3 prizes, activate the Karate Belt, and then you just start swinging. You start hitting hard with the Urshifu. You start spreading more damage if they didn't bench a Mew. And, if they bench a Mew too early, we can always end up KOing it. Something like a boss Max Phantom play, or maybe put a damage counter on it, and then you Max Phantom again the next turn. And so being able to pick off the Mew is quite nice. So yeah, I like in those matchups where there's no weakness, going with the Dragapult early, especially if you get that turn 1 attach on it. And then late game, you're going with Urshifu, you're swinging hard, you're swinging fast, and you're saying, I'm also going to spread damage if you don't have a Mew down. But if you bench the Mew too early, I'm also probably going to pick it off with the Dragapult. So that's the general idea of the deck. ADP is another one. ADP, I really like to go in with the Dragapult as well. Start spreading the damage counters, and then you really set up that massive swing turn late in the game. Against ADP, if you're able to avoid benching the support Pokemon, the matchup's literally the freest thing you'll ever have. If you end up benching them, it can get a bit tough because you will never prevent the Ultimate Ray play. At least not any way I can really think of you'll be able to prevent it. We hope that they Ultimate Ray into our Dragapult with the Horror Energy on it to take the extra damage, and that extra damage from the Dragapult is what's going to allow us to potentially take the KO, because 1 Horror Energy plus 2 Max Phantoms does equal 280, which will let us actually KO that ADP. Trying to think if there's any other matchups. Tempozard is another matchup that we can be a little bit worried about as well. But the Tempozard matchup, it really depends how they go and how you want to go. They usually play Mew. We do have to spend a turn taking out that Mew because we're going to want to take multi-prize turns. We're going to want to, if they bench an Oricorio ever, we want to be able to put at least 1 damage counter on that Oricorio at some point with a Max Phantom play. Typically, like I said, we're spreading damage. We want to get our Mew down to prevent the snipes whenever we can. We want to just apply pressure. We want to take out their Mew as soon as possible. And really, we're going for that late game stamp, hopefully Swell as well, and hope for the best. Tough matchup, but it is super winnable. for sure, especially if they're not playing Mew. But most Tempo Zards should be playing Mew currently. So that's the deck. It's kind of the game plan around it as well. I've only played a handful of games with the deck. I don't know how. I won a lot of them. I don't think I was supposed to win most of them, but I kept winning. So maybe the deck's actually super good, but it feels so awkward to play. Highly suggest trying it out though, because like I said, it won most of the games we played, so it's probably pretty good. And it was made by arguably the best deck builder and probably the best player in the entire game. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if there's any changes that you immediately think you want to make, or if you've tried out a similar list and have any other ideas. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, all the other YouTube stuff below, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out.